Hello, NG Poland. How's it going? It's really exciting to be here for the fourth year in a row. You might remember me here from 2019. That was the first time I was here, talking about some of the magical TypeScript features. And then the two online, where I introduced Component Store and NGRX Component Store for the first time. And the next year was talking about testing, so earlier this year. So very excited to be here with yet another talk. Today I'm going to be talking about setting up enterprise front-end for success. But first, again, I was already introduced. I'm a principal architect at Cisco, part of the core NGRX team, Google Developer Expert at Angular, and the organizer of Angular Toronto. So if you're ever in that area, let me know. You can also find me on Twitter at Okrushko. So just as George introduced me, many of you know as basically NGRX team member from Canada. But what some of you might not know is I actually grew up and was born in a beautiful country, Ukraine. And this year, we had we were planning a 20-year graduation from school come together. So 20 years we were planning in January, the beginning of this year. And then, I grew up in Kharkiv. That's the city right there. And the thing about Kharkiv, it's 20 kilometers away from one of our neighbors right there. So we were planning, we were very excited. It's like 27 people in the group coming together, and we do it every big anniversary. And then February happens. The week after the war started, my friends sent me the picture of my school. That's where my school is. It didn't end there. 2 months later, my school looks like this. So why I'm telling you this? Well, I'm telling you this because I really appreciate the support from all of you. A lot of the world supported Ukraine. A lot of Poland supported Ukraine. So thank you so much for your support. All right, so let's switch to the actual topic that I want to talk to you about. And this is the setting up enterprise front end for success. What does it mean? What's the objective of this? So let's figure out, what do we want from our front end? We want to be able to deliver code frequently with the simple and well-understood processes, with the code that's very high quality, code that's scalable and maintainable, that is well-designed and well-reviewed. Right? So this is the goal, at least for my teams. This is the goal for the projects that I want. This is how I want to deliver my features. Now, given this goal, what steps can we do to actually achieve this? And before I get to the steps, actually, why do we actually want this? So frequently, development, we think about development as implementing a feature, right? But I'd argue that as engineers, we want a little bit more than just implementing a feature. We want to be like a good homeowner. We want to own the feature, right? It's not only about the code. It's also about the quality of the code that we write, how it looks on the UX side. And also, we want to make sure that it actually gets to the customers. Right? So engineering ownership is that pride that gives us to actually really be proud and really own a piece of code that we're delivering to the customer. So that, I think, is based on 3 pillars: the people, the tools, and the processes. I'm not going to touch a lot on people, but there's a few things I want to touch on there. So team communication is there. And I'm going to talk about tools like monorepo, feature flags, and code automation. I'm going to talk about processes such as trunk-based development, code styles, testing, and planning. So let's start with the team communication. This is especially important if you want to have some changes within the team, right? So for example, you want to implement new processes. Without communication, without well-established channels, you might not hear each other. You might be in some silos, right? So there are a few suggestions that I have for front-end teams that try to work together, especially as the team grows larger. First, have a channel where anybody can ask any questions. This is really important to help each other. The second one, though, is have a channel for an important updates. Because again, the helping channel could get quite noisy, but you do not want people to miss important announcements and changes within your code base or processes or tools. So, and obviously also set up, even though I'm not a big fan of emails, my inbox gets pretty busy, but still have a mailer alias for the front-end teams, mostly for like invites for the meetings and things like that, so you can come together and discuss things. So let's touch a few on tools as well. And I'm going to talk about, very briefly, about the monorepo and feature flags. What's the monorepo? Monorepo is a way for us to store the code from all of our products, for all the front end, for example, in the same repository, right? It's still, monorepo is not monolith. You can still release your apps independently. For example, if I have a products front end that I want to release, it'll take the pieces that it needs, maybe some common components, some other libs that it needs, and build it and release it. When I need to release the other front end, for a cart, for example, it can still pull things together that it needs and then get it to the production. The cool thing about this is things like common components, libraries, you don't really need to even manage the versions of it because it'll be right there in the repo. And when the front end needs them, it'll use some of those components that it needs and build them. It's one version. It's very easy to maintain, and it scales very nicely. So that's, again, I'm going to be talking very briefly about every topic because, I mean, each topic could be a talk on its own. So the next thing is the feature flags. What are feature flags? Feature flags is basically your branching without having branches in the Git, without Git branches. It allows us to have those basically if or ng-if conditions and see the value of the flag and have either existing code or the new code working on it. So if we have a current code and we want to introduce new behavior, we'll basically branch in the code and have the new behavior there. There are multiple types of feature flags. There are compile time feature flags, and my favorite ones are runtime feature flags. That's the one that you can turn on and off in the running application without need to redeploy things. This allows you to turn on features when you need them and not when you have to deploy, right? That also allows to turn off the feature if it goes badly. So once we have this new behavior, we can then, and it's enabled in production, we can then remove the code, the dead code at that point. So what are the things that these runtime feature flags help us with? They allow to decouple rollout from itself, like how we deploy the code to production, and feature enablement by itself, right? So that means that code being deployed to production does not mean that the features will be there. It allows you to really control when you enable your features. It's not only for features as well, it's also for some like switching from one API to another. You can also use this. It allows you to de-risk your rollouts. So you don't have to do rollbacks or more frequently hot fixes. It also allows to unblock the teams. If you have multiple teams working on the front end and one team is not ready with their feature, well, if it's behind a feature flag, no problem. You can still deploy and then enable that when they are ready. And the other thing that feature flags are useful for, they are actually enabler for the next step, which is a trunk-based development. So trunk-based development is another very important step, I think. Before I get there, let me put this to, there's things that are complicated, and there are things that are complex. And those two terms are not the same thing, I argue. Complicated takes a lot of time to figure out. It's not intuitive. It's hard to understand. Complex, on the other side, is still based on a set of simple rules. For example, like birds flying together, they do not come together before they take off and say, okay, you fly first, you fly second, you go there, you go there. They don't do any of that stuff. They are all doing this based on simple rules. There's one bird that flies in the front, and then there's every other one go to the right or to the left because it reduces their drag. So, and then once the first bird gets tired, it gets pulled on and the other one takes place. They reorganize on basic, simple rules. So when I design my systems, I like complex systems still to be based on the simple rules. That's what we want. In fact, simple rules is a key. As Leonardo da Vinci said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, and I couldn't agree more with that. So let's take a look at a few branching strategies. There are Git flow, GitHub flow, many Git strategies, and a lot of them are based on having multiple long-living branches and things happening and things like that. I'd argue that's quite complex. It's frequently, developers don't know when to merge PR, where to merge them, when the branches have to be merged. It basically becomes a very complicated system. Wouldn't it be better just to have a single branch and have all those PRs being very short-lived and getting in very frequently with minimal deltas? That's the strategy that I prefer. So trunk-based development, I think, is a huge team enabler. It removes a lot of the confusion out of the development process. So what does it help us with? It helps us save time merging code. This is where a lot of issues come in. This is where some of the PRs get lost. This is where merges can introduce breakages and things like that. It also will simplify developer processes, right? Again, it's well understood. And it also means that some of your bugs, smaller bugs that don't require feature flag, can get in production sooner because they are not ending up on some of the long-living branches. They are basically in the main trunk branch. All right, so we touched on a few already: team communication, monorepo. We touched on feature flags and trunk-based development. Next, let's focus on some of the code reviews and PRs, and particularly code style. I think this is a very important part as well as part of the team culture. One study said that best performing teams have a shared understanding of excellence. When everybody on the team understands what's expected, what the good looks like, it's a lot easier to bring the rest of the team to that. In our teams, we use a number of things to help us get this shared understanding of excellence. Some of them are TypeScript style guide. Right? We don't want to be arguing how we should be doing this. We should have a single source of truth for that and can point to that during code reviews, for example. Angular style guide. We're using the Angular style guide that's published by the team, and then we extend it further to make some rules stricter. Testing guide is very important as well. And some other best practices. So this is good to have, right? It's good to know all the good, all the shared understanding. It's all written there, but you have to read and adhere to that. Wouldn't it be better also to have tools to help with some of that? And indeed, it's one of the good things to set up. For example, do we want to argue about should there be a space? Should we start the parentheses on the new line or something like that? No. We want to have it automatically enforced automatically formatted. So for example, Pretty is one of those tools to help with this. ESLint rules is another great enabler. There are many ESLint rules. There are ESLint rules for TypeScript. There are ESLint rules for NGRX, RxJS. You can build your own custom ESLint rules to enable certain patterns that you want to enforce automatically before even wasting people's time looking at this and trying to highlight this. In fact, many of the TypeScript style guide rules are actually automated through the ESLint in our repository. Strict TypeScript. I keep saying this. TypeScript is our friend. Have the strictest mode possible. Drop your annies. Right? Well, you want to be able to catch those issues at development time, at compile time, not at runtime saying this is not a property of undefined. And some of the other PR pipeline tools, be it SonarQube, some security scans and things like that, do use them to help you get things faster out. Testing. Testing is another one. We'll have Shai later on today who will talk extensively about testing. But testing is an important part. Is it a QA problem if my code breaks? Or is it my problem? How can that group of people can be responsible for the code that I write? It hardly makes sense to me. And there are different types of testing. Unit testing, integration testing, again, visual testing, acceptance testing, all those tests, I feel developers should be writing themselves. And this comes to the developer ownership of the processes, right? Remember the implementation part? So we also want to own the quality part, and then the release part as well. Okay. Hopefully you're convinced. If not, you had the other talk. Planning is also an important part. I mean, if you don't plan things, they go a little bit sideways. And this also comes down to this essential ownership thing. To really own the planning, you need to really own the product. You have to have some planning beforehand. And so how do we do planning? What we found that works for us is to have those code design documents ahead of time before your feature is actually implemented. If you start discussing, I want to say arguing, but discussing your code approach to how it's implemented during PR time, that's already too late. Somebody already worked on it and implemented this. Spend time on this. Wouldn't it be better to have it a little bit sooner, have a small design doc that will say, hey, this feature has this objective, some background, and then high-level design doc. Hey, this is my component tree, will look like this. Or we'll be changing component tree to look like this, right? And then some of the state flows. Like our state will live here, this is a component would use it, and so forth. This is, again, a great thing to do for your teams to be productive. You might say, oh, I don't have time to write this, but you will actually save time because it will, you can lose all this time during PR discussions and then back and forth. This will also help establish some of the better practices on the team, share the knowledge. So basically have that design doc. Send it for review a little bit earlier. Let other people take a look and provide feedback about this. So once that's done, schedule a design review meeting. In fact, in our teams, we have it every week. It's automatic. And people just put their docs there for review. And then during design review meeting, we'll go into details, maybe some suggestions, maybe some questions, and make some decisions. And everybody is invited to those, and everybody learns from them or contributes to them. And final step is daily releases. If all goes well there, daily releases is something that will really enable your teams. It's so much better than those hot fixes. If you have a bug that can wait for a day, you can just implement it and wait, and it'll just naturally get in the next day. It's a huge team enabler. And this is almost frequently the ultimate goal. You want to get there. And to get there, I feel like you have to have a lot of those previous S steps going right. So those are the pillars. And again, the specific steps that, again, I feel in a sequence, some could be done in parallel, would really help to push your front end to really great success. And that's team communication, monorepo, feature flags, trunk-based development, code styles, automation, testing, and planning. And if it goes well, you'll get to your daily releases. On that note, I just want to quickly introduce, again, I'm part of the NGRX team, and we've heard a lot of struggles with NGRX, and some people want to have some suggestions. So that's why we launched enterprise support for NGRX. If you're interested in this, it's right there now in the NGRX.io site, and you can scroll down and send us the email. We'll be happy to chat. One thing I want to add as well, there's official Angular Discord. It's at discord.gg/Angular. There's almost 28,000 people there. Feel free to join the community there as well. And we also have one for NGRX at discord.gg/NGRX. And on that, thank you so much. I'll have some stickers for NGRX, by the way, in the hall later on. But again, thank you so much for attending this conference.